Hello guys, today I'll be talking about 5 new metal albums that I really dug when I was a kid, and these are albums that I really dug during like elementary school and middle school, that time in my life. So yeah, I got into music really early in my life, and new metal was kind of the genre that kind of got me started with rock and metal, mainly bands in that genre. Linkin Park was kind of the band that kind of started it all for me, to be honest. But anyways, let's go ahead and dive into these albums. These albums really make me nostalgic, so let's go ahead and talk about them. So the first album I want to talk about is Meteor by Linkin Park. Probably one of the most important albums in my, I guess, music journey, or really in my life in general, because this is an album that I've listened to in full, like probably a million times at this point. I've listened to it a lot, and I still enjoy it today, of course. But yeah, honestly, probably one of my favorite albums of all time. There is plenty of diversity, and I still think it's Linkin Park's best. I know many people really love and enjoy Hybrid Theory, but that's honestly my second favorite from the band. Meteor has to be at the top for me. Definitely an album that just means a lot to me in general on a personal level, and I don't know where my music taste would be at without this album, but some of my favorite tracks on the album, of course, some of the singles like Somewhere I Belong and Numb and From the Inside. But I also think the album has some pretty good deep cuts or B-sides or however you want to put it, like Hit the Floor and Nobody's Listening. Figure Point Zero Nine is probably one of my favorite Linkin Park songs. I've always really dug that song ever since the first time I heard it. But yeah, definitely love this album, and definitely an album that definitely makes me feel a bit nostalgic. But next we have the album Volume 3 by Slipknot. Now this album was my introduction to Slipknot. I discovered them through Guitar Hero 3 with the song Before I Forget. And yeah, I remember hearing it for the first time and just really being blown away by Corey Taylor's voice, and of course the riffs too. But what really stood out to me at that time was Corey Taylor's voice. I was really in love with his voice at that time. And I'll admit, at that time, I never could really get into Stone Sour, and to this day, I still really can't get into them, to be honest. Now, they do have a few songs that I do like, mainly from their debut. I mean, I do like a couple songs from their second album, but overall, a band that I can't really get into for some reason. But I wouldn't say that they're bad by any means. But yeah, with Volume 3, probably, well, to no surprise, one of my favorite albums from them. This album in Iowa honestly fight for being my second favorite Slipknot album. The debut is at the top for me, but yeah, when I hear certain songs from this album, I definitely feel a bit nostalgic, especially when I listen to a song like Before I Forget or Duality or Blister Exists or Welcome, or even the intro or the first track, Prelude 3.0. I remember when I heard that song for the first time, I was really intrigued by the dark, emotional vibe of that song, and thought it was kind of different, especially for me at that time. But yeah, Volume 3 by Slipknot, definitely a great album. But next we have the album Around the Fur by Deftones. Now, I'm sure I've told this story a million times on this channel, or maybe just a few, but how I came across Deftones was through iTunes. I think it was the song My Own Summer. That song was being recommended under an album that I was listening to. I checked it out, really dug it, and then I checked it out Around the Fur and became a fan ever since. And this was around like 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. I became a fan, and yeah, this will probably always be my favorite Deftones album. I know many people love White Pony, but the album's in very close second, but I don't know what it is about Around the Fur. I just really like the heavy nature of some of the tracks on the album, especially songs like Labia and Lotion. Really underrated songs, in my opinion, from the band, along with Knife Party and Maine, Cherry Ways, Command Control, and just to name a few songs. But I don't know what it is about this album, but it's always been an album that I've just always really loved, and always thought there was never a single weak track on it. Now, if I had to narrow it down to maybe one song I think is maybe the weakest song on the album, maybe Die of the Flu, but that's honestly not really saying much, because that's a song that I think is also pretty good, and probably a song that I think I've grown to like more and more with time too. But yeah, The album has great deep cuts, and the singles are, of course, are great too. I mean, "Be Quiet and Drive" is easily one of their best songs, at least top five for sure. But yeah, Around the Fur, love this album, and probably one of my favorite albums of all time, to be honest. Next, we have the album "Follow the Leader" by Korn. Now, honestly, I could have talked about Issues or the self-titled too, but those two albums and this album were albums that I listened to a lot back then, especially around like sixth, seventh grade, somewhere in there. I listened to those albums a lot, but especially this album. I remember really loving "Freak on the Leash" when I heard it for the first time on Guitar Hero World Tour, if I remember correctly. But I've always really dug other songs on the album, like "Dead Bodies Everywhere." That's always been one of my personal favorites on the album. I really liked "It's On." "Cameltosis" was a song that didn't do much for me at the time, but I've grown to like it more and more again over time. But "On the Family" I remember really liking, and "Reclaim My Place" I remember being another favorite of mine on the album. And I remember really liking the bagpipes in the album closer, "My Gift to You." And I've always thought that hidden track, Earache, My Eye, or something. I can't remember the name of that song, but I think it was like a Cheech and Chong cover or something like that. But I've always found that hidden track to be kind of interesting, but I've always really dug it too. But yeah, "Follow the Leader," definitely one of their best albums, and along with the other albums that I mentioned from them, Issues and the self-titled. But yeah, "Follow the Leader," definitely an important and a classic album in the new metal genre for a reason. But next we have, finally, the last album here, "Shadow Zone" by Static X. Now, out of all the albums that I've mentioned here, this one is probably going to be the least recognizable one, because Static X wasn't really as big as some of the other bands on in this video, probably the least popular. But I mean, if you're a new metal fan, definitely give Static X a chance. They are one of the ones that came early in the genre, late 90s or so. But they started with their album "Wisconsin Death Trip," which was definitely a unique album at the time, and I know critically it did pretty well too. But "Shadow Zone," I believe, was my introduction to the band. It was either this album or the next album, "Start a War." I think "Start a War" was the first album that I bought from them, but "The Only" was my introduction to the band, and I remember really digging that song. But some of my other favorites on the album were probably "Control It" and "New Pain." I remember really liking those songs. "Destroy All" too. "Kill Your Idols" is another song that I remember really liking. I remember liking the first half more than the second half. I remember not returning to the second half a whole lot, but I mean, of course, once in a while I did with certain songs like "So." But yeah, I wouldn't say it's their best album, but one of their best, maybe. But definitely kind of different too for them. The album is a bit more melodic, a bit more mainstream, a bit more straightforward, but I've always really dug the album, of course. But of course, I mean, it was my introduction to the band, or at least some of the songs off the album. I can't exactly remember, but yeah, definitely a great album. If you want to get into Static X, definitely start off with one of their first three albums, "Wisconsin Death Trip" or "Machine," or this album, "Shadow Zone." They're often categorized or lumped in with the whole industrial side of new metal, and I think that's definitely fair too, and I can probably agree with that. So if you're more interested in checking out their more industrial side first, definitely start off with their debut. But if you want to start off with something a bit more accessible, I guess you could say, maybe start off with this album, "Shadow Zone." But yeah, again, definitely a great album. But anyways, let me know your thoughts on these albums. Are these albums that make you feel nostalgic too, and all that good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe. Have a nice day, and take care.